The orphan waited by the river each morning, until a cowboy asked, "Need a daddy, little one?" The sun had barely climbed above the cottonwoods when the boy came to the river again. Mist drifted low across the water, the kind that softened sound and made the world feel half asleep. His boots were too big for him, sloshing in the mud as he walked the same narrow path he'd walked every morning. He carried a tin toy horse in one hand and an apple core in the other. Each time the wind rustled the reeds, he turned, thinking maybe, just maybe, it was his pa returning. But it was only the wind, carrying the smell of rain and smoke from far-off chimneys. The boy, Toby, sat on a flat rock and stared at the current. "He'll come back," he whispered, though he sounded unsure. Across the river, a man on horseback slowed his pace. His coat was dusted with trail dirt, his hat pulled low to block the morning glare. Jonas Reed had been riding 3 days from Abilene, following no trail but his own need for quiet. He reined in when he saw the boy. For a moment, Jonas thought the child might belong to someone fishing nearby. But there was no one, just a lonely figure by the water, small against the rising sun. He rode closer, boots creaking against the stirrups. "You lost, son?" he called out. Toby blinked, wary but hopeful. "No, sir. I'm waiting for my pa. He said he'd come back for me." Jonas studied the boy, the hollow cheeks, the dirt on his collar, the way his hands trembled, though the morning wasn't cold. "How long you been waiting?" Toby thought for a moment. 3 mornings now." Jonas exhaled slowly, looking upriver where the current twisted between reeds. He dismounted, the gravel crunching beneath his boots. "Ain't much sense in waiting hungry." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a piece of jerky. "Here," Toby took it shyly. "You a lawman?" Jonas shook his head. "No, just a man passing through." The boy nodded, chewing in silence. The river whispered between them, carrying the sound of a far-off hawk. Jonas crouched near the water. "What's your name?" "Toby." "All right, Toby, you got a ma somewhere?" "She died. Pa said we'd find a new place by the river. He went to get food and came back with a wagon, but he ain't come yet." Jonas frowned. The child's voice was flat, too practiced for his age. He could see the crusted footprints near the rock, days old, no wagon tracks close by. Something wasn't right. "Where's your pa from?" Toby shrugged. "Said a town called Dry Creek." Jonas stood, brushing off his coat. Dry Creek was 40 miles west. He'd passed no wagons on the way, no sign of anyone looking for a missing boy. The wind picked up, rippling the river's skin. Jonas looked at the child again. Small, quiet, waiting like it was his duty. "Come on," Jonas said finally. "Town's a few miles south. Sheriff'll know where to find your pa." Toby hesitated. He said not to move from this spot. Jonas's voice softened. Maybe he meant till help came. The boy studied him, trying to read the truth in his eyes. Something in Jonas's tone, tired but gentle, made him nod. Jonas lifted the boy onto his horse. Toby's small hands clung to the saddle horn. As they started toward town, the sun burned away the fog, showing the wide stretch of land ahead. Bare, wind-tossed, endless. Jonas glanced back once at the river. The rock was empty now, only the toy horse left sitting there. Shining faintly in the light, he said nothing. But the sight tugged at something buried deep, a quiet ache he'd long tried to forget. The wind carried dust over their trail as they rode toward town, 2 shadows merging into one against the pale horizon. By the time Jonas and Toby reached the town, the sun was high and hot. Dust hung in the air, stirred by passing wagons and restless horses tied to the hitching posts. The sign at the edge read, "Welcome to Ash Bend, population 312. Jonas guided his horse down the main street, past the saloon, the general store, and a blacksmith hammering in steady rhythm. Folks turned to watch. A drifter bringing in a child was something to notice in a town this small. Toby held tight to the saddle horn, his hat slipping over his eyes. Jonas felt the boy's small frame press against him. Trusting, though he had every reason not to, they stopped in front of the sheriff's office. Jonas dismounted, lifted Toby down, and tied his horse. The boy's eyes darted around, nervous. "Come on," Jonas said gently. "Let's get you looked after." The sheriff's office smelled of old tobacco and gun oil. Behind a cluttered desk sat Sheriff Alcott, a man with graying whiskers and kind eyes that had seen too much. He looked up from his paperwork when the door creaked open. "Morning," Jonas said. "Found this boy sitting by the river. Says he's been waiting 3 days for his pa." Alcott set his pen down and studied Toby. "That so, son?" Toby nodded, voice small. "He went to fetch our wagon. Didn't come back." The sheriff leaned back, sighing. "Where was this?" "By the Cottonwood crossing, 10 miles north." Something in Alcott's face changed. "Cottonwood, you say?" He stood, reached for a newspaper clipping pinned to the wall. "We found a man up that way 3 days ago. The name was Harlan Price. Owned a ranch outside Dry Creek." Jonas frowned. "You think he's the boy's pa?" The sheriff crouched down beside Toby. "What's your full name, son?" "Toby Price," the boy whispered. The room went quiet. The sheriff glanced at Jonas, then back to the child. "I'm sorry, Toby, your pa's gone on to heaven. We buried him the day before yesterday." Toby stared at him, not understanding. Then his lip trembled. He backed toward Jonas, clutching the man's coat. Jonas rested a hand on his shoulder, unsure what else to do. "I didn't know," Jonas said quietly. The sheriff's eyes hardened. "You were seen up that way, weren't you? Fit in the description of a drifter riding a bay horse?" Jonas straightened. "Passed through, yes. Didn't see anybody." "Well, someone did," the sheriff said, "and they told me about a stranger camped near Price's ranch." "That wouldn't have been you, would it?" Jonas's jaw tightened. "I don't rob the dead, Sheriff. I just found the boy." Alcott studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "You can stay in town till I sort this out. Best not to ride off. Folks spook easy around here." Jonas nodded once. "Fair enough." He led Toby outside. The boy's face was pale, his voice barely a whisper. "He ain't coming back, is he?" Jonas knelt down. "No, son. I reckon not." Toby looked toward the horizon where the river shimmered faintly in the distance. "That was our place. He said it was where we'd start over." Jonas swallowed hard. "Maybe you still can?" He rented a small room above the livery stable that night. The boy curled up on the bed, clutching the tin horse tight. Jonas sat by the window, listening to the crickets. Below, the townsfolk were already whispering about the stranger, the dead rancher, the orphaned boy. Jonas rubbed his temples. He'd only meant to help, but something in this place was twisted deep like a root gone bad under dry soil. When Toby finally drifted to sleep, Jonas looked out the window again. The moonlight pooled over the rooftops, silver and still. He didn't know it yet, but this town would test every part of him, his name, his honor, and the promise he hadn't meant to make. Morning light slipped through the cracks in the shutters, falling across Toby's sleeping face. Jonas sat in the corner chair, boots off, hat in his lap. He hadn't slept much. The sounds of the town, the piano from the saloon, a dog barking, footsteps in the hall had kept his thoughts turning. He wasn't sure why he was still here. A wiser man would have left before sunrise, but the boy had nowhere to go, and Jonas wasn't the kind of man who could walk away from that. Not anymore. A knock came at the door. Jonas opened it to find a woman standing there with a basket of bread. She was in her 30s, wearing a faded blue dress and a calm expression. "Sheriff sent me," she said softly. "Said the boy might need breakfast." Jonas nodded. "He's still asleep, that's all right. I'll leave it here." She set the basket down, then looked at Jonas more closely. "You're the one who found him, aren't you?" "Yeah. You're kind to do it." Jonas gave a half smile. Some might not agree. Her gaze softened. "This town's quick to talk, slow to listen. Don't let it bother you." She tipped her head politely and left. Jonas watched her go, then turned back to the bed. Toby had woken and was sitting up, rubbing his eyes. "Smells like bread." "It's for you," Jonas said. "Eat." As Toby chewed quietly, he asked, "We going somewhere today?" Jonas hesitated. "Reckon we should talk to the sheriff again. Maybe he's heard something about your pa." The boy nodded, though his face fell at the mention. Downstairs, the livery owner, Mr. Kane, watched them pass with a cold stare. "You the drifter the sheriff's holdin'?" he asked. Jonas met his gaze. "He ain't holdin' me. Just stayin' put till things clear." Kane spat tobacco into a tin. "You'd best hope they do. Folks don't take kindly to strangers who bring trouble." Jonas said nothing. He'd heard that tone before. In border towns, mining camps, and once from a man who'd drawn a gun over a rumor. At the sheriff's office, Alcott sat behind his desk, talking to a tall man in a brown vest. When Jonas entered, both men stopped. "Jonas," the sheriff said, "this here's Deputy Kincaid." Kincaid's eyes were sharp and watchful. "So you're the one who brought the Price boy in?" "That's right." Kincaid stepped closer. "Funny thing, that. Last anyone saw of Harlan Price, he was alive and yelling about a drifter sneaking around his land. Then he turns up dead and you ride in with his son." Jonas's voice stayed even. "You think I killed him?" Kincaid smirked. "I think it's a mighty convenient story." The sheriff held up a hand. "That's enough, Kincaid. We don't have proof of nothing yet." Jonas looked between them. "What do you know so far?" "Price was shot in the back," Alcott said. "His wagon and deeds are missing. We found his horse wandering free. No sign of who did it." Jonas nodded slowly. "Then you best keep looking." He took Toby by the hand and turned to leave. As they stepped outside, Kincaid's voice followed them. "You best not stray far, stranger. This town's got a long memory." Jonas didn't look back. He walked Toby down the boardwalk, past the general store where folks whispered and stared. That evening, Jonas found work stacking hay behind the livery, enough to pay for food and the room upstairs. Toby watched from the fence, his small hands gripping the wood. "Can I help?" he asked. "Not yet," Jonas said. "You just rest for now." The boy nodded but didn't move. He watched Jonas like a man afraid to be left again. When the sun sank, the town grew quiet. Jonas sat with Toby by the stable fire, the glow dancing across their faces. "Was your pa a good man?" Jonas asked softly. Toby nodded. "He said we'd build our own place. He said folks wouldn't laugh at us anymore." Jonas stared into the flames. He remembered his own father, drunk, mean, gone before morning. He knew the kind of promises that never came true. "We'll figure this out," he said finally. "But you gotta be brave." Toby looked up. "I can be." Jonas managed a faint smile. "I reckon you already are." The fire cracked softly. Outside, the wind carried faint voices, the kind that belonged to men who didn't stop talking once they'd decided a thing. Jonas knew before long they'd come knocking. The knock came sooner than Jonas expected. It was near sundown the next day. The sky burned orange over the roofs of Ash Bend, and Jonas was brushing down his horse when heavy footsteps climbed the stairs to his room. 3 sharp knocks. He opened the door to find Deputy Kincaid standing there, hat tilted low, badge glinting in the fading light. 2 townsmen stood behind him, both holding rifles. "Evenin', Reed," Kincaid said. "Sheriff wants another word." Jonas's hand stayed on the doorframe. "That's right. What about?" Kincaid smiled thinly. "You'll hear it from him." Inside, Toby peeked out from behind the bed, clutching his toy horse. "What's happening?" Jonas gave him a calm look. "Just talk, kid. I'll be right back." Kincaid's grin widened. "Boy stays here." Jonas's jaw tightened. "He's scared enough already." "He comes with me." The deputy hesitated, then shrugged. "Suit yourself." They walked together down Main Street. The evening wind carried grit across the ground, stinging their faces. The saloon doors swung as they passed, laughter spilling out, but folks went quiet when they saw Jonas. At the sheriff's office, Alcott stood by the desk with a paper in his hand. His expression was grim. "Jonas," he began, "I sent a wire to Dry Creek. Got word from Price's foreman. Says he saw a stranger near the ranch the same day the killing happened. Described your horse, your coat." Jonas's voice stayed level. "That doesn't make me a killer." "I know," Alcott said quietly. "But it doesn't look good either." Kincaid leaned on the wall, arms crossed. "Sheriff, maybe we ought to hold him a few days. Make sure he ain't riding out in the night. Toby pressed closer to Jonas's leg, eyes wide. Alcott rubbed his temple. I ain't locking up a man without proof. Proof? Kincaid snapped. How about a dead man, a missing deed, and this drifter showing up with the orphan? Jonas met his glare. If I were guilty, I wouldn't have brought the boy back. The sheriff looked between them, weighing the air. Jonas, stay close. Don't leave town till I say. Jonas nodded once and led Toby out. As they walked, Toby's voice trembled. They think you did it. I know, Jonas said softly. But truth doesn't hide forever. That night Jonas couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching the lamplight flicker on the street below. The wind rattled the shutters. Somewhere a dog barked, then went silent. He thought of Price, the dead rancher he'd never met. What kind of man left his boy by a river? What kind of man was desperate enough to get himself killed? Something didn't sit right. Jonas had seen enough men die to know when a story had holes. The next morning he saddled his horse early. We're going for a ride, he told Toby. Where? Back to the river. There's something I need to see. They rode out as the sun rose, the light breaking through low clouds. The land stretched wide and quiet. When they reached the cottonwood crossing, the boy fell silent. The rock where he'd waited still stood by the water. The toy horse gone now. Jonas dismounted, scanning the ground. The sheriff's men had been here before, but not carefully. He crouched, brushing his fingers over the dirt. Hoof prints. 2 sets. One belonged to a big ranch horse, the other smaller. Lawman's kind, maybe. Both were fresh around the time of the killing. Your pa was shot in the back, Jonas murmured to himself. That means he knew who was standing behind him. Toby frowned. What do you mean? Jonas looked at him. I mean, your pa trusted the wrong man. He followed the prints a little way until they faded into dry brush. That's when he spotted something glinting in the weeds, a silver button stamped with a star. Jonas picked it up, his heart tightening. It wasn't from a rancher's coat. It was from a deputy's uniform. He slipped it into his pocket and mounted up. Come on, kid. We're done here for now. As they rode back, clouds gathered dark in the distance. Jonas knew what he had now wasn't proof, but it was close enough to get him killed if the wrong man found out. Back in town, Kincaid was already waiting near the livery, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Find what you were looking for, Reed? He asked. Jonas looked him dead in the eye. Not yet, he said. But I'm getting there. Kincaid's smirk faded just a little. That night, thunder rolled over the plains. Jonas sat awake by the window again. The silver button in his palm and the storm outside felt like the start of something that wouldn't end easily. Rain came before dawn. It drummed against the roof and poured down the dusty street, washing away the footprints and talk from the day before. Jonas watched the storm from the window, the silver button resting on the table beside him. Toby still slept, curled beneath a blanket too big for him. The boy had stopped asking questions last night, as if he'd learned already that answers came slow in this world. Jonas turned the button over in his fingers. The badge star was worn, the metal dulled with age, but the design was clear. Ash Bend issue. That meant it belonged to one of 2 men, Sheriff Alcott or Deputy Kincaid. Jonas trusted his gut. Alcott was tired but decent. Kincaid was something else, too sharp, too quick to accuse. Jonas had seen men like that before. They carried secrets heavier than their guns. When the rain eased, Jonas pulled on his coat. Toby stirred. We going somewhere? Store first, Jonas said. Need supplies. They stepped out into the wet morning. The town was quieter now, steam rising off the rooftops as the sun broke through thin clouds. Jonas noticed fewer stairs this time, though the whispers hadn't stopped. Inside the general store, he bought dried beans, a rope, and a small knife for Toby. Mrs. Daly, the storekeeper, looked uneasy handing him the bag. Sheriff says you're staying, she said carefully. Hope you're not thinking of riding off. Jonas met her eyes. No, ma'am. Not yet. She hesitated, then leaned in slightly. You be careful of Kincaid. He's got a temper. Sheriff covers for him, but that man's been in trouble since before he pinned on that badge. Jonas's hand froze on the counter. That so? Mrs. Daly nodded. He owed money to Harlan Price. The whole town knew it. Price was fixing to take back his land if Kincaid didn't pay up. Jonas thanked her and left. Outside, Toby trotted beside him, the small knife clutched proudly in his hand. As they crossed the street, Kincaid's voice came from behind. That's quite a weapon for a kid. Jonas turned. Kincaid stood on the boardwalk, one hand resting near his revolver, eyes narrowed. Just a tool, Jonas said calmly. For cutting rope, not men. Kincaid smiled thinly. Long as he learns the right lesson. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You've been poking around more than I like, Reed. I'd watch where you stick your nose. Jonas didn't blink. You worried about something I might find? The deputy's grin vanished. I'm worried about the law. And if I hear you've been riding near Cottonwood again, I'll haul you in myself. Jonas tipped his hat slightly. Then I'd best stay close, deputy. They locked eyes for a long moment before Kincaid turned and walked away, spurs clinking in the wet dirt. Later, Jonas took Toby to the blacksmith's barn, offering to help mend a fence in exchange for a hot meal. It kept them busy, and work had a way of quieting the mind. But that night, when they returned to the room above the livery, the door was open. Jonas froze. Inside, the lamp lay shattered on the floor. The bedding was tossed, drawers pulled out. Someone had searched the place. He crouched low, checking the shadows, then pulled Toby behind him. Stay close. Nothing was missing except the silver button. Jonas's stomach tightened. That meant whoever came in knew exactly what to look for. He set his jaw, anger slow but deep. He knows, Jonas muttered. Who? Toby asked, eyes wide. The man who killed your pa. Rain started again, soft and steady against the roof. Jonas looked out the window toward the sheriff's office, where one lamp still burned. He could see two shadows moving inside, Alcott's heavy frame and Kincaid's lean one. For a long time, Jonas said nothing. Then he reached for his hat. Get some sleep, Toby. The boy frowned. Where you going? Jonas's voice was calm, steady. To find out how deep this hole goes. He stepped into the wet street, his boots splashing through puddles, and the town seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere in the dark, a door creaked open, then shut again. Jonas didn't look back. The truth was waiting, and he meant to find it even if it buried him. Jonas crossed the street with rain dripping from the brim of his hat. The sheriff's office glowed faintly through the window, warm against the cold night. Inside, he saw Alcott bent over his desk, writing something. Kincaid stood by the wall, arms crossed, talking low. Jonas pushed the door open. Both men looked up. Evenin', Jonas said evenly. Someone broke into my room. Alcott frowned. You sure? Sure as rain, Jonas replied. Didn't take money or food. Just one thing, a silver button. Sheriff's issue. Kincaid stiffened. You saying we had something to do with it? I'm saying whoever did knew what to look for, Jonas said. And they didn't want me keeping it. Alcott stood slowly. What kind of button? Jonas met his gaze. Badge star. From a deputy's coat. For a second, no one spoke. The sound of rain filled the room. Kincaid's jaw worked. That's a mighty serious claim. Jonas nodded. So's murder. Alcott raised a hand. Enough. Jonas, you're accusing a lawman without proof. You got witnesses? No, Jonas said. Just tracks and a missing button. But it's something. Kincaid stepped forward. You're digging your own grave, Drifter. Jonas's eyes didn't move. Seems to me the man who killed Harlan Price already dug his. The sheriff's hand rested on his holster, not in threat, just habit. Jonas, best you leave this be. I'll look into it myself. Jonas stared a moment longer, then nodded. You do that. He turned and walked out into the rain. Down the street, the saloon was still open. Light spilled through the swinging doors and piano music drifted out, rough but steady. Jonas stepped inside. The noise dipped for a moment as heads turned, then rose again. He found a corner table and ordered coffee. His coat dripped onto the floorboards. At the bar, two men were talking, one ranch hand, one freighter. Jonas caught bits of their conversation through the noise. Price was setting to sell half his land, owed money to half the town. Deputy Kincaid was always hanging around his ranch, arguing over something. Jonas leaned back, piecing the talk together. A debt, a fight, then a killing. He was still thinking when a familiar voice came from behind. "You're up late, Reed." It was the woman from before, the one who'd brought bread. She wore a dark shawl, rain glistening on her hair. "Couldn't sleep," Jonas said. "Too much noise in my head." She sat across from him. "I heard what they're saying about you. Don't sound fair." "Fair doesn't come easy," he said quietly. "You know Kincaid well?" Her eyes flickered. "Knew him once. Before he wore that badge." "What kind of man was he then?" She hesitated, lowering her voice. "The kind who'd borrow what wasn't his, and hurt folks to keep it quiet." Jonas nodded slowly. "That tracks." The woman looked worried. "If he knows you're asking questions, he won't just talk." Jonas's tone stayed calm. "I don't need him to talk, just to show his hand." He finished his coffee and stood. "Thanks for the warning, ma'am." When he stepped outside again, the rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke. He walked back toward the livery. The streets were empty now, lanterns flickering weakly in the breeze. Halfway there, he heard it, a click behind him. Metal on metal. Jonas froze. "Don't turn," came Kincaid's voice from the dark. "You should have rode out when you had the chance." Jonas said nothing. "You find that button," Kincaid continued, "and you think it means something. But nobody's going to believe a drifter over a deputy." Jonas turned slowly, hands loose at his sides. "Maybe not. But truth's got a way of crawling out from under lies. Always does." Kincaid's pistol gleamed in the moonlight. "Too bad you won't be around to see it." Jonas moved before the deputy could finish. His hand shot out, grabbing the barrel and twisting hard. The gun went off, the shot cracking through the night. The muzzle flash lit their faces, one calm, one desperate. They struggled in the mud, fists flying, boots slipping. Kincaid swung wildly, cursing. Jonas drove a shoulder into his chest, knocking him down. The gun skittered away into the street. Kincaid lay gasping, rainwater pooling around him. Jonas picked up the revolver and pointed it down. "Why'd you kill him?" he asked. Kincaid spat blood. "He was going to take everything. Land, badge, all of it. He wasn't better than me." Jonas's voice was low. "You left his boy to die." Kincaid glared up, hatred and fear mixing in his eyes. "You think the law'll care? They'll hang you for this." Jonas stepped back. "We'll see." He turned toward the sheriff's office, gun still in hand. The truth wasn't clean, but it was clear now, and before this night ended, everyone in Ash Bend would know it. Jonas walked through the rain-soaked street, the revolver heavy in his hand. The town was quiet now. No lamps burning, no dogs barking, just the echo of his boots and the low rumble of thunder rolling far away. Behind him, Kincaid's groans faded into the distance. He hadn't killed him, though a small part of him wished he had. Truth mattered more. He needed the law to see what kind of man Kincaid really was. When Jonas reached the sheriff's office, he pushed open the door. Sheriff Alcott looked up, startled, his pen dropping to the desk. "Jonas?" "What the hell?" Jonas tossed the revolver onto the table. It landed with a thud. "Deputy's gun. He just tried to shoot me." Alcott's eyes widened. "You sure about that?" Jonas nodded. "I got his confession. Said he killed Harlan Price over land and money." The sheriff stood slowly. "Where's he now?" "Lying in the street. He's breathing. For now." Alcott stared at Jonas for a long moment, the rain dripping from the brim of his hat. Then he grabbed his rifle and headed for the door. "You'd best come with me." They walked back through the empty street together, their boots splashing through puddles. When they reached the corner near the livery, Kincaid was gone. Only muddy footprints remained, leading toward the river road. Alcott cursed under his breath. "He's running." "I can catch him," Jonas said. The sheriff hesitated. "You ain't law." Jonas met his eyes. "Neither is he." A beat passed, then Alcott nodded. Bring him back alive if you can. Jonas untied his horse, swung into the saddle, and kicked off toward the river. The rain had stopped, but the ground was slick and dark. The moon broke through the clouds now and then, showing flashes of Kincaid's trail, hoofprints deep in the mud. He followed them north, past the cottonwoods, past the rock where Toby had once waited. The river shimmered in the distance, pale under the moon. Jonas spotted movement, Kincaid's horse limping along the far bank. He rode hard, cutting across the shallows. Water splashed high as he reached the other side. Kincaid turned, pistol in hand, eyes wild. "Don't do this, Kincaid," Jonas shouted. "You can't outrun it." The deputy fired. The bullet hissed past Jonas's ear. Jonas dropped low, urging his horse forward. The next shot missed, too. When he got close, he swung from the saddle and tackled Kincaid into the mud. The gun flew out of reach. They rolled by the riverbank, fighting for breath, slipping on the wet ground. Kincaid grabbed a rock and swung. It grazed Jonas's shoulder. Jonas answered with a punch that sent the deputy sprawling. "You don't understand," Kincaid gasped. "He was gonna ruin me. Take my land, my badge, everything I built." Jonas stared down at him, breathing hard. "You built it on lies." Kincaid reached for his boot knife, but Jonas kicked it away and pinned him down. "It's over." The deputy's strength left him. Rainwater and tears mixed on his face. "You think the law'll save you, Reed? Town already hates you." "Maybe," Jonas said, "but they'll know the truth." Behind them, the sound of hooves came. Sheriff Alcott riding hard. He dismounted and aimed his rifle. "Don't move, Kincaid." The deputy went still, chest heaving. Alcott stepped closer, disbelief on his face. "Jonas told me what you said. Please tell me he's lying." Kincaid looked away. "That's what I thought," Alcott muttered. Jonas climbed to his feet, wiping mud from his coat. The sheriff cuffed the deputy and pulled him to his knees. "Why'd you do it?" Alcott asked quietly. Kincaid's voice broke. "He laughed at me. Said I wasn't fit to wear the star. I just snapped." Alcott's face hardened. "You killed a good man." The deputy hung his head. "Ain't no good men left out here, Sheriff." Jonas turned toward the horizon. Dawn was coming, faint light stretching over the plains, painting the river gold. He felt no joy, only a tired kind of peace. The sheriff looked at him. "You had no reason to stay, Reed. Why'd you help?" Jonas thought for a moment. Kid needed the truth. "Guess I did too," Alcott nodded. "Town'll owe you for this." Jonas shook his head. "Don't owe me a thing. Just make sure the boy's safe." The sheriff's voice softened. "He's got you now, don't he?" Jonas looked down at the river where Toby had once waited, alone and scared. "Maybe he's got both of us." They rode back toward town in silence, the sun climbing, the air clearing. The worst was done, though Jonas knew scars like this didn't fade easily. Behind them, the river shimmered, washing clean what it could. By the time Jonas and the sheriff rode back into town, the sun had burned through the clouds. The streets were still damp from the storm, shining like glass in the morning light. Folks had begun to stir, doors opening, boots on porches, whispers spreading faster than dust in the wind. Jonas could feel every eye on him. Some looked curious, others suspicious. He didn't blame them. Rumors in a small town were harder to kill than rattlesnakes. The sheriff tied Kincaid's hands to the hitching post outside the jailhouse. The deputy's face was pale, jaw tight, but he didn't say a word. The sight of him there, once proud, now broken, drew a crowd fast. A ranch hand pointed. "That's Deputy Kincaid." "What's going on, Sheriff?" Alcott raised his hand for silence. "You'll get the truth soon enough." Jonas stood back, mud drying on his coat. His horse snorted beside him, restless. From across the street, Martha, the widow who ran the boarding house, stepped forward, Toby beside her. The boy's eyes went wide when he saw Jonas. "Mr. Jonas," Toby cried, running toward him. He nearly stumbled, but Jonas caught him and lifted him up. "You okay, son?" Jonas asked softly. Toby nodded, holding on tight. "Mrs. Martha said you'd come back." Jonas smiled faintly. "She's a smart lady." The sheriff turned toward the crowd again. Listen up, all of you. Deputy Kincaid is under arrest for the murder of Harlan Price. He confessed last night. Jonas Reed had nothing to do with it. Gasps spread through the crowd. Someone muttered, "That can't be true." Another whispered, "Guess the drifter was telling the truth after all." Alcott's voice grew sharper. "You all judged a man before you knew the facts. That ain't how this town's supposed to be run." Kincaid spat into the dirt. "Don't act holy now, Sheriff. You let him think it too." Alcott's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. He signaled for 2 deputies to take the prisoner inside. As they dragged Kincaid away, Jonas set Toby down. The boy looked up, frowning. "He was my pa's friend. Why'd he do it?" Jonas knelt beside him. "Some folks lose their way, Toby. They forget what's right. But that's not on you." Toby's lower lip trembled. "He said bad things about my pa. Said he wasn't good." Jonas's eyes softened. "Your pa made mistakes, same as any man, but he tried to build something honest. That's what counts." Toby nodded, his small hand clutching Jonas's sleeve. Martha stepped closer, her voice gentle. "You'll be staying now, Mr. Reed." Jonas looked out across the street, past the saloon, the smithy, the dusty road leading west. "Don't rightly know yet. I've never been much good at staying." She gave a faint smile. "That boy needs someone who won't ride off when it gets hard." Jonas met her gaze. "I know." He paused, then added quietly, "So do I." For a moment, neither spoke. Only the sound of the wind through the cottonwoods filled the silence. Sheriff Alcott came over, wiping his brow. "Jonas, the doc's gonna write up the report. We'll send word to the county judge. You can clear out as soon as you want, but you could stay a while too. Folks'll come round." Jonas tipped his hat. "Appreciate that, Sheriff." The man nodded. "You earned it." As the crowd began to scatter, Toby tugged at Jonas's sleeve again. "Can we go to the river?" Jonas frowned. "Why there?" Toby looked down. "That's where my pa said he'd come back for me." Jonas's chest ached at the words. "All right, son. Let's go." They walked together past the edge of town until the river came into view again. The water moved slowly and was bright now, calm after the storm. Toby stood at the same spot he'd waited before, his tin toy still tucked in his pocket. He took it out, looked at it, then set it gently on the rock by the water. "He ain't coming back, is he?" Jonas shook his head. "No, son, but you ain't alone no more." Toby turned to him, eyes glistening. "You mean it?" Jonas placed a hand on his shoulder. "Yeah, I mean it." They stood there a while, just listening to the river. The sound was peaceful, like something had finally ended and something new was just beginning. The wind carried the smell of wet earth and pine. Sunlight spilled through the trees, touching Toby's hair, making it shine. Jonas felt the weight in his chest ease a little. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a man running from something. He felt like a man who'd found a reason to stay. Jonas stayed by the river with Toby for a long moment, watching the sunlight dance on the water. The boy's small hand clutched his own, and for the first time he didn't let go. "Think we should build a cabin here?" Toby asked quietly, eyes bright. Jonas smiled faintly, looking at the gentle curve of the river and the cottonwoods swaying in the breeze. "Maybe it could be our place, just you and me." Toby's grin widened, and for the first time in days, he laughed, a sound Jonas hadn't realized he'd missed. They spent the morning walking along the riverbank, looking at the land and imagining where the cabin could go. Jonas taught Toby to tie knots to check the water for fish and to recognize the tracks of rabbits and deer in the mud. By noon, they returned to town. The streets of Ash Bend were quieter now. Folks were still talking, but the tension from Kincaid's arrest had faded. Some watched Jonas with wary respect. Others just nodded in silence. Jonas led Toby to the sheriff's office. Alcott was waiting, paperwork spread across the desk. "Jonas," the sheriff said, eyes tired but kind. "I've filed the report. Kincaid's confession will hold." "The town knows the truth now," Jonas nodded. "Good, that's what matters." Alcott looked past him toward the door. "You think you'll stay around?" That boy needs you. Jonas hesitated. He'd spent so many years moving from place to place, never letting himself care too much. But looking at Toby, he realized he'd found something worth staying for. I reckon I will, he said finally. Somewhere's gotta be home, might as well be here. Toby's face lit up. Really? Jonas ruffled his hair. Yeah, really. No more waiting. Martha came up then, carrying a basket of bread. She smiled at the boy, then at Jonas. Looks like you found your place too. Jonas tipped his hat. Maybe I have. The afternoon passed slowly, filled with simple tasks. Jonas helped Toby set up a small corner in a spare room above the livery. The boy stacked his few belongings carefully, a worn blanket, his tin horse, and a small journal where he had been drawing every morning he waited by the river. Jonas watched silently, a lump in his throat. The child's hope and determination reminded him of something he'd lost long ago. By evening the sun was low, painting the sky orange and pink. Jonas and Toby walked to the river again. This time they didn't sit in silence. Toby skipped stones across the water, laughing when one bounced twice. Jonas smiled at the sound, letting the warmth of the moment sink in. You think we can stay safe here? Toby asked. Jonas looked at him, steady and calm. We will. Ain't nothing gonna take this from us now. Toby leaned against him, small and trusting. Jonas put an arm around the boy's shoulder, feeling the weight of responsibility but also the strange lightness that came with it. They watched the river together as the day faded. The storm from earlier seemed like a memory, the land quiet and forgiving. Jonas knew there would be challenges, but for the first time he didn't feel alone. The boy, once abandoned and scared, now had someone who would never leave. And Jonas, the drifter, had someone who made him want to stay. The river flowed steadily, reflecting the sky and the hope they were building together. As twilight settled, Jonas whispered softly, more to himself than to Toby. Guess you ain't waiting no more. Toby smiled, snuggling closer. And for the first time both of them felt like they had found a place to call home. The next morning the town of Ash Bend was quiet, bathed in soft gold sunlight. Jonas and Toby stood outside the livery watching the horizon. The river sparkled behind them, calm and steady, like it had been waiting for this moment too. Jonas adjusted the brim of his hat, glancing down at the boy. You ready for today? Toby nodded, eyes shining. We gonna ride? Jonas smiled. Ain't no better way to start a day than riding together. They led the horse to the open trail, Toby climbing carefully into the saddle behind Jonas. His small hands clutched Jonas's coat as they set off across the plains. The wind carried the scent of wild grass and pine, filling their lungs with freedom. As they rode, Jonas thought about everything that had happened. The dead rancher, Kincaid's betrayal, the town's whispers. It all seemed heavy at first, but now it felt like a story that could finally end. Toby leaned forward, whispering, You think Pa's watching us? Jonas chuckled softly. I reckon he is, kid. But he'd be proud. You've been brave. They rode in silence for a while, letting the landscape stretch out before them. The sun climbed higher, making the dust on the trail glow like gold. Birds called from the trees and the distant hills rolled with soft, inviting curves. Eventually Jonas slowed, stopping near the river where Toby had waited so many mornings. The same rock was there, bare now, holding only the memory of past hope and worry. Toby jumped down, running to the edge of the water. He tossed his tin horse into the river, letting it float gently. It's time, he said, voice full of certainty. Jonas watched the toy drift downstream, the current carrying it away. Time for what, kid? To start over, Toby said simply, turning to him. Not waiting no more. Jonas's chest tightened with something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. He lifted Toby back onto the saddle and they continued along the riverbank. The land was open, forgiving, ready for new stories. By midday they reached a small clearing with flat ground and soft earth. Jonas dismounted, helping Toby down. Together they began planning a small cabin, marking the spots for walls, a fire pit, and a place to hang their gear. Toby laughed as he dug tiny holes, pretending to plant flowers. Jonas worked beside him, swinging a small axe, imagining walls and a roof, a home filled with warmth. When the sun began to dip toward the horizon, they stopped, leaning on the tools. The land was quiet except for the gentle flow of the river and the call of a hawk overhead. Jonas looked at Toby, then back at the wide-open plains. "We've got a lot of work ahead," he said. Toby grinned. "We'll do it together." Jonas nodded. "Yeah, together." As the last light faded, the river reflected the sky's colors, pale pinks, golds, and soft purples. Jonas and Toby stood side by side, two souls who had found each other, ready to face the future. The boy was no longer waiting. Jonas was no longer wandering. Together they had built the first piece of a life that was theirs, honest, safe, and full of hope. The river flowed steadily, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. And in that quiet, golden moment, the world felt right again. If you loved Jonas and Toby's story, hit that like button and subscribe for more Wild West tales of courage, hope, and found family. Don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss a story.